The clock struck midnight. Shadows danced on the walls. A cold wind howled outside. It was a night for scary stories. But for Shelley, the horror was real.
Shelley was a normal teenager. She loved music, gossiping with friends, and watching silly videos on her phone. But tonight, everything felt different. A shiver ran down her spine. Something was wrong. The phone rang, piercing the silence of the night. Shelley jumped, her heart racing. It was late, far too late for a casual call. Who would call at this hour? The clock showed 2:15 a.m., and the streets outside were eerily quiet. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in the stillness of her room. She hesitated before picking up the receiver, her hand trembling. "Hello?" Shelley's voice trembled, barely above a whisper.
Silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. Only the sound of heavy breathing on the other end, slow and deliberate. Fear coiled in her stomach like a snake ready to strike. She quickly hung up, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Shelley tried to forget the call, convincing herself it was just a prank. But the unease lingered. Deep inside, she knew it wasn't. The heavy breathing echoed in her mind, refusing to be silenced. It sounded too real, too close, as if the caller was right there in the room with her. She glanced out the window, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lurking. The night seemed darker, more menacing. Shelley double-checked the locks on her doors and windows, her paranoia growing with each passing second. Clutching her phone tightly, she sat on her bed, wide awake, waiting for the dawn to break.
The phone rang again, its shrill sound cutting through the silence of the night. Shelley stared at it, paralyzed with fear. Should she answer? Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears.
Before she could decide, the ringing stopped. The sudden silence was deafening, filling the room with an eerie stillness. But then she heard it, a whisper. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably there.
"I'm coming!" The words were drawn out, each syllable dripping with malice.
The voice, raspy and low, sent chills down her spine. It was as if the darkness itself had come alive and was speaking to her. It was coming from the phone, even though the call had ended. The receiver lay still, yet the whisper continued. Shelley was sure of it. Terror gripped Shelley. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every muscle in her body was locked in place, paralyzed by fear. The voice was closer now, right outside her window. She could feel its presence, a cold, malevolent force pressing in on her. Her every instinct screamed at her to run. But where could she go? The darkness seemed to close in from all sides, leaving her with no escape.
The phone rang again and again.
"I'm at your door. I see you."
Each word was like a hammer blow to Shelley's heart. Shelley was trapped. She didn't know what to do, who to call. The fear was crippling. All she could do was wait, listen and pray for a miracle. Suddenly the room fell silent. The phone stopped ringing. Shelley held her breath, listening for any sound. Then she heard a soft knock on her bedroom door. Shelley froze. The doorknob slowly turned. Her breath caught in her throat. She squeezed her eyes shut, unable to face what was coming.
Shelley wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She felt a presence in the room, cold and menacing. The air grew heavy, suffocating. This was the end.
A hand reached out and gently touched her shoulder. The room was cloaked in darkness, the only light coming from a faint glow outside the window. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of Shelley's shallow breathing. Shelley flinched and opened her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt disoriented, as if she had been pulled from the depths of a dark, unsettling dream. Standing before her was her father, his silhouette barely visible in the dim light. His presence was both comforting and alarming. His face was etched with worry, lines deepening around his eyes and mouth. He looked as if he hadn't slept in days.
"Shelley, what's wrong?" His voice was a mixture of concern and fear, trembling slightly as he spoke. "You were screaming in your sleep." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the unknown.
Shelley looked around the room, her eyes wide with fear. Shadows danced on the walls, creating shapes that seemed to move and shift with a life of their own. The phone was on the nightstand, the door was closed. Everything seemed normal, yet something felt terribly wrong. It was all a nightmare, she told herself, trying to calm her racing thoughts. But the fear lingered, refusing to let go. But as she hugged her father, seeking comfort in his embrace, she felt something cold and hard in her hand. She looked down and saw it was a small, smooth stone, its surface cool against her skin. It was a small, smooth stone, something that seemed out of place in her bedroom, stained with something that looked like blood. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was holding. A chill ran down her spine as a terrifying thought crossed her mind. Was the nightmare truly over, or was it just beginning? She looked at her father, confusion and fear mingling in her eyes. What did this mean? How did the stone get there? The questions swirled in her mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Was it a sign, a warning, or something far more sinister? The room seemed to close in around her, the darkness pressing in as the weight of the unthinkable truth settled over her.